The golden age of the web series is dead, or so some might say. Sure, independent content has flourished and has no signs of slowing down, but much of that is non-fiction content, or perhaps the internet's version of reality TV. So what happened to web shows like VGHS or High Maintenance that seem to capture a large audience of viewers? Also, how did we get here? Where did the web series come from? What's the web series purpose, and what does the future of independent web series look like? That's coming up in this video. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Anton Wong and I'm here to unleash the power of video, so if you have not yet, hit subscribe. Now before I get into what this has to do with an article lamenting the death of indie narrative web shows and a company using tween influencers to make web shows to take on Nickelodeon, I first want to look at the history of narrative web shows. By the way, I'll be calling them web shows instead of web series from here on out, because web series is both plural and singular, and that can get kind of confusing. Back before the 90s, the internet was mostly known as an internetwork of computers, many of which were business machines that you would use to send bytes of information like short messages. It wasn't until personal computers got popular that the internet got fast enough and the World Wide Web was created that the average Joes started to publish their own content. Before this, wannabe filmmakers and television producers either had to work their way up the Hollywood ladder, make commercials and music videos like in the 70s and 80s and into the 90s, or submit a self-funded film to Sundance and just hope for the best. In 1995, that all began to change when TheSpot.com became the first episodic story using text, photos, and video clips to tell fictional stories of young 20-somethings living in LA and dealing with relationship drama. Turns out, it's a pretty reliable subgenre. The show also allowed fans to interact with the show by emailing the characters advice and what they would like to see them do, which the writers would then take and implement into the script. This was the first time that the shows could interact with fans at such speed. Before then, fans would have to write in letters into the studio after the show goes to air. The show was a hit and they were able to bring in significant revenue from product placement deals and selling banner advertisements, which people back in the day actually used to click on. Of course, this was still in the 90s and paying for server space to host this much content and 100,000 hits was not cheap. So despite creator Scott Zakarin's securing venture capital money, the show ultimately ceased production. The show nonetheless inspired many others to create independent and funded content and other shows for the internet into the 2000s, which kind of changed a little bit when the .com crash happened. People felt uncertain about the general future of the internet, let alone, making internet shows. But people across the world still made web shows as Japanese anime shows started popping up online, produced specifically for online content, and the company Rooster Teeth created Red vs. Blue, a show inspired by the Halo video game, and is actually currently the longest running web show. This was also the rise in what some might call Web 2.0, which describes social networks and sites full of user-generated content such as Facebook, LinkedIn, and of course, YouTube. Started in 2005, YouTube was launched as a streaming video hosting service and platform that anyone could upload to for free. Many of these videos were just videos of people's cats and torrents of TV clips, and of course personal video diaries before they were known as vlogs. One such uploader went by the name of Lonely Girl 15, talking about mundane things about being a teenage girl, which slowly became increasingly bizarre, talking about magic and cults and stuff like that. Turns out Lonely Girl 15 was actually a fictional series made by Bay Area filmmakers. The Is It Real or Is It Fake web series was really popular at this time, with Canadian web mockumentary Pure Ownage also making this sort of strategy with the life of a pro gamer. Anyway, this was when you started to see online indie web content grow even more as production costs came down and distribution costs became free on YouTube. People online started producing so many narrative shows. WebFests became popular on sites like Film Freeway, where you could just submit your web series to festivals for showings and awards. The first ever streaming awards were established to celebrate video content. YouTube had opened up its partner program to start sharing ad revenue with uploaders, and people were finally making money as YouTubers. Despite attempts from Blip TV, Rever, and other sites, YouTube became the place to be for user-generated content online. What happened? Well, as people figured out how to game the system, YouTube had to change its algorithm to prioritize watch time, which was great for people who made tutorials, vlogs, commentary videos, let's plays, and other inexpensively made content. However, that also meant that narrative filmmakers and web show creators found it increasingly more difficult to produce quality produced content, especially narrative content. After people like Issa Rae, Ilana Glazer, Felicia Day, and others created critically acclaimed shows, they moved on to traditional television shows and movies. The ability to create web shows continued to get cheaper, but the market for financing this thing, well, it has changed. This was something that was lamented by writer and web show creator Pablo Andrew. In his article, he talks about how he started making his first series just as Workaholics, High Maintenance, and Broad Cities were airing their cable TV versions after starting life as web shows. But in the late mid-2010s, the term web series was something people just didn't want to associate themselves with. MCNs and other companies had also found it difficult to sustain quality narrative web shows, and many services had to shut down. And while user-generated indie content was still happening on multiple platforms, it seems that less expensive non-fiction content had won over fictional series. And there were web fests that had shut down, quality web shows that had received less coverage than their streaming giants or non-fiction content. People were still trying to make shows from crowdfunding, but had vastly different expectations. There were, however, some shows that were able to be made consistently, and I can name 3 kinds of shows that were able to do this up until this day. The first being the Indian web shows that were often produced in English, Hindi, or other South Asian languages. And it was produced for and by South Asians for the most part. In fact, if you type in web series into the YouTube search bar, you'll get dozens of results of South Asian web shows. Another would be established creators on the platform making both fiction and non-fiction content, so people like Wong Productions, Smosh, and Corridor Digital. The third would be companies like Viacom CBS-owned Awesomeness TV, making stuff for Gen Z audiences with branded content, and another one called Brat TV, doing something very similar. Now, if you haven't heard, Brat TV is a company that produces narrative web shows which star teen and tween influencers as the main characters. It was started by an American entrepreneur who set out to fill the market with narrative web content for tweens and teens, just how Awesomeness TV does with teens and 20-somethings and Nickelodeon does with tween age kids, but in linear television. Like I said, the show's business model relies on making shows that star young social media influencers that already come with their own audiences and then sell brand deals and product placements for those shows that they cast them in. Some of these influencers may have prior acting experience while others might not. The shows have starred people like Kenzie Ziegler of Dance Mom fame, Francesca Capaldi from Disney Channel's Dog with a Blog, and TikToker Dixie D'Amelio. Their flagship show Chicken Girls starred as Jules LeBlanc, who when she was cast had no prior acting experience. I just watched the first season and let me tell you, it was rough. I actually made a video about the whole thing on my friend Avery's channel, Avery Talks About Stuff, where we talk about season 1, and you can check that out in the link below. You know what, let's just ask her. Avery, what do you think of the show, and what do you think that it means for the future of narrative web shows? What does it look like?
I've just finished covering Chicken Girls on my channel, and I have been through an experience. I knew of Brat TV, mostly from watching other commentary channels cover it. I remember Attaway General was a really big thing that blew up and everybody was talking about how weird it was a few months ago. But I had never sat down to actually watch one of these shows because I do sometimes cover modern content on my channel, but I cover a lot of old stuff, so watching this didn't really occur to me right away for the sake of content, and also I'm way too old for the target demographic. I feel so old watching the show. So this was my first time actually watching any of their content. I watched the entire first season of Chicken Girls, and OMG, as they all say in Chicken Girls, I'm hip with the kids. Now, I will say, going in, I did not have very high expectations. Because, it's children's content. I'm not gonna sit here and act like the content that I didn't grow up watching wasn't super cringy and bad, too. I think my favorite movie when I was 12 was Camp Rock. Yeah. And I know some people would say you shouldn't hold kids' TV to a very high standard because it's kids' TV. I disagree. I actually spend a lot of time talking about kids content on my channel, and I'm a firm believer that making things for kids is all about not talking down to them and not seeing them as a cash grab demographic, which I feel like Brat TV really does see that tweeny bopper age as a cash grab, and it seems to be working for them when it's a good business model from a purely marketing standpoint, to put a bunch of kids that are already famous in one show together and then cross-promote it on all their platforms with millions and millions of followers, it's going to be successful. Add to that this seems to be made on a pretty small budget, just from looking at it. I can see why they're still doing this. And I'm sure some kids really like it. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and tell kids that they're dumb for liking something that's specifically tailor-made for them. I'm just saying. Remember Lazy Town? When I was a kid, we had Lazy Town, and that was a weird show, but like, it was better than this. I definitely think long-form content on YouTube is super viable as a medium. Content in general, whether it's narrative content or even commentary content or anything, has just been getting longer over the past couple of years. That seems to be what people like to watch as more people gravitate towards online media as a form of, you know, long-standing content in their lives. I definitely think there is a future to be had with web series. I think they're onto something with their general framework of what they're actually doing. I just wish they actually made content that was better, you know? Like, it's been a very long time since I was in middle school, but when I was in middle school, I wouldn't have been able to relate to any of these characters. No preteens or teens on Earth are like these characters. They apparently don't have any classes, and all they do is go to dance practice and go to dates at the arcade without being able to drive themselves anywhere. What's that all about? But I definitely see a gap in the market for quality web series. And so to any, you know, aspiring creators out there, I would definitely say take advantage of the ability to make content and post it online at your own free will, you know? Living in this era of YouTube and social media in general is definitely the best era that filmmakers, content creators, and the like have had so far. It makes it so much easier for us to find our audiences, and I hope that you guys will take heart in looking at Chicken Girls and saying, you know what, if that show got greenlit, then anything I write, produce, or create has the potential to get greenlit as well. That's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you guys for listening to me. Thank you, Anton, for having me back on the channel. I'll see you guys around. Bye!
Thanks, Avery. You can view our collaboration video on her channel in the description. Now, when I think about it, I do agree that this channel seems to be onto something as well. The idea of casting kids with existing audiences that they can draw from and produce inexpensive shows is actually an idea that Awesomeness TV is kind of doing, and ones that you see with linear TV channels like Nickelodeon or MTV. You see those guys doing it too. They might not have the same cash flow that Awesomeness has because, you know, these shows do actually seem like they have more thought put into them, you know? But if Brat TV takes the storytelling on a budget method that other YouTube channels are using, they can end up producing more quality stuff. You know, not necessarily Emmy nominated stuff, but, you know, stuff that just is good enough that you don't want to rip your hair out when you're watching it. Which brings me to what I think the future of narrative web content and web shows look like. Of course, I think companies like Awesomeness and Brat TV will continue to exist. But what about independent creators? I mentioned that Indian web shows are abundant right now and they're just absolutely killing it. But what about everyone else? I mentioned that channels like Corridor Digital and Wong Productions are continuing to make content with fan support. Corridor has a membership website to fund their new shows, and Wong Fu has their Patreon page to fund their content. And while these guys are established creators, I think newer creators can still definitely have a slice of that pie. If you build an audience of dedicated supporters who are willing to support and fund your projects, and if you learn how to make quality content for cheap, you can make narrative web shows on a pretty sustainable basis. Of course, that's easier said than done. Nobody should say that this is an easy endeavor. I'm possibly considered going this route, but I know that it's going to take a lot of work and strategy to pull it off. But if you're lucky, you can be like one of these folk. Even if you're not, I think I would echo Pablo Andrew's closing statement by saying that I keep making web shows because I have stories I want to tell and share that don't work in other formats. I'm trying to carve a niche for them. I'm searching for their audiences, not because I'm hoping to gain 1 million subscribers or attract an agent or development exec. I owe it all to the people who worked on these stories, those who supported, financially or otherwise, those who watched, and the indeterminate contingent out there with whom these shows might resonate. And that's what it's really about, community. Telling a story in a certain way is what drew me to web series, but that sense of camaraderie and belonging is what hooked me on them. And hopefully when you make a web series, if you make a web series, you won't make something that sucks. And if you want to watch Avery and I review something that needs work, you can click right over here to watch our reaction of Chicken Girls Season 1. Or if you would like, you could also watch this video where we talk about why filmmakers and creators should watch bad movies. But either way, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in one of these next videos.